Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. The last few days of July are upon us, and so is the latest podcast detailing all of what the sports world has on its plate, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard, and for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And some quick housekeeping notes to start. On Friday, I released my latest commentary video on my YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. The little engine at Kurtz trying to get to 1,000 subscribers and beyond. So all the help that I could get from those out there, whether you're a first time, if this is your day one, or you go back to me from the very first day. So check it out. The latest one, which was released about the WNBA. And I know you're going to say, wait, JAYREELZ, WNBA? Nobody cares about that. Well, dating back to almost a year ago, I was talking about how I was going to get into the WNBA this year, considering how much it soared in popularity dating back to last year. And even though I know it's been around for over 25 years, but I dropped the ball and I had to come forth with a confession in reference as to why I have not wrapped my arms around the league coming into this year. And I also made a couple of references regarding two other sports that have also followed the same suit. So check it out. I appreciate it, as I'll have more commentary video, more critique videos to come, as well as a live stream. And that's another note. This Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube. Check it out, because not only will I talk about what's happening in sports, maybe some trades that will start percolating, as the deadline is Thursday at 6 p.m., but I'm also going to have a giveaway, and I also want to run by a couple of things to you guys and gals in reference to guests, in reference to the locals, or I should say the denizens of the chat room who are there with me each and every Wednesday, as far as being a guest on the live stream, as well as a pretty ambitious endeavor that I have for next month, which I want to share with you guys and gals. So you don't want to miss it. YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. Like I said, you have to subscribe to stay tapped in, people. So if you could do so one more time, I greatly appreciate it. And also, yes, if you're probably wondering, watching on Spotify or even the channel, and if you did not see any of the shorts over the weekend that I had put forth, you're probably wondering, JAYREELZ, what happened to your head? I'll talk about that later on as well. Maybe at the very end of the podcast, just so you get an idea as to why. And I didn't lose a bet or anything crazy like that. And I understand it's going to be almost 100 degrees the next 3 days, so people can think, oh, it's summertime, the heat. Yeah, that's partially the reason, but no, even a bigger reason as to why, so I'll talk about that later on. All right, so let's get right to it. Let's get cracking. It was another wild weekend in baseball, just like last weekend coming out of the break, and then this weekend was the same. And to me, the headline of the weekend has to be the Astros. Now, in the grand scheme of things, I think they'll be fine. I'm not going to worry about the Mariners bringing in Josh Naylor, although he's a good veteran stick, and he's a guy that's going to add a little bit of punch to go along with Cal Raleigh's 41 home runs. I'm going to talk about Cal Raleigh. He could actually is on pace to break Aaron Judge's American League record, which I know the Yankee fan probably has one eye peeled to see whether or not Raleigh could continue this hot streak, as he hit, I believe over the weekend, he hit his 40th and 41st yesterday for sure against the Angels. But as far as the Astros go, they're going to be fine in the grand scheme of things. So even if Seattle, if they make a couple of moves here, who knows if they're going to try to bring back Eugenio Suarez to play third base to add another bat, which would be interesting, because then you'll have a right-handed bat to complement the left-handed bat for Josh Naylor. I think all in all, the Astros will be fine. But when you have an athletic team that, although they have a very good lineup, and a team that I thought was going to be a bit of a surprise. Now, were they going to make the postseason? Absolutely not. But I thought, because of what they were trying to build there, considering they moved from Oakland to Sacramento for the next few years before heading off to Vegas, I thought that this was going to be a team that was not going to do much. And considering they were going into Houston over the weekend, I didn't think anything of it. I thought, all right, if they get a split, that'd be good for the Athletics. But the A's did a number. I mean, they beat them pretty badly over the weekend, including that Friday night game, 15-3, to where Nick Kurtz, and you're probably still wondering who this guy is because he's having a big-time year. 23 homers, 59 RBIs. He's batting .309, and his OPS is over 1,000. So right now he's a lock for the AL Rookie of the Year. But he put up a performance for the ages. In the game Friday night, not only was he 6 for 6, he had 4 home runs in the process, drove in 8, and scored 6 runs. That is unheard of, and 19 total bases to boot, which was equivalent to what Shawn Green did in a Dodger uniform back in May of 2002. And I remember it was an afternoon game in Milwaukee to where he had that feat. And here it was, he pretty much matched what Shawn Green did, and it was a little bit shortened for the performance that Mark Whiten had, if you recall, back in, I believe, 1990 at the old Riverfront Stadium against the Reds. And I want to say it was the nightcap of a doubleheader to where Mark Whiten hit 4 homers and 12 RBIs in the game. And obviously, with Kurtz falling 4 RBIs short, but still a performance that ranks all time of one of the single greatest game performances in the history of Major League Baseball. And he did it in his 66th game. So it's not as if he had 4 or 5 years under his belt. It's not as if he's a longtime veteran or a future Hall of Famer. This is a guy that is just getting his feet wet, and he just murdered the Astro pitching staff. Now, I understand the last home run came against a position player, and 2 of those home runs were to the Crawford boxes, which I get it. Even me batting right-handed, and remember, Kurtz is a left-handed bat. Even he reached the Crawford boxes, and I get it. It is a short porch there in left field. But still, it happened in a Major League game, so you got to count it. And that was just indicative of how the weekend went for the Astros. And, right, we can still sit here and look at that. They have a 5-game lead or now 4-game lead, in the American League West. And you would think even if Seattle or Texas, who's now on a bit of a tear here, as they're also 4 games back, so you got to look out for them. And they swept the Braves over the weekend. I understand, big whoop. But still, now the Texas Rangers are coming at the Houston Astros fast and furious, so we'll have to also keep an eye out for them. And I still think Houston will prevail, considering they should expect Yordan Alvarez back at some point, you would think, which will be an enormous slip to that offense and to that lineup. But the Astros, any concerns? I'm going to say no as of right now. Let's see what they do here in the early part of this week. Now, I believe they go to Boston over the weekend, and we'll take a look at the early part of the schedule because I believe they have the early game this coming weekend, that Roku 11 o'clock game. So that will be an interesting matchup for the Astros as let's see if they start their road trip today or if they entertain another series at home. Now, today, well, they'll host the Nationals for 3, I believe, and then they'll have to go to Boston, and that could be a 4-game series. Let me take a look at that. Now, you'll have a little bit of a World Series rematch, although far from the cast of characters that performed in that 2019 World Series, where the Nationals will be at whatever that ballpark is, Daikon Field, as it's called. It was formerly Minute Maid, as you know. But they'll have a 3-game series in Boston, and that will be on Friday. But the Nationals will come in, and hopefully that will be the remedy for them to get back on the beam to see if they could get in the win column. But that was the story of the weekend. Now, I know an even bigger story from a health standpoint was Aaron Judge. For whatever the reason, he had this elbow issue in Toronto where he was having not trouble throwing the ball into the infield from right field, but you could tell he was wincing during that series. And then it was known after Friday night's game that on Saturday, he had to go for an MRI. It was feared that it was going to be a UCL injury, which would have been Tommy John, and he would have had to be shut down for the remainder of the season, which would have been a devastating blow to the Bombers. But as it was just a flexor strain, which means rest. So he's not going to throw a ball for another 8 or 9 days. So when he returns, he's going to be a DH. He's not going to play the outfield, which means Giancarlo Stanton will probably play a bulk. And who knows how much of a bulk is, considering that he has not played the outfield since 2023. And I believe he did play in the outfield yesterday. Let me just double check that. So for Stanton, who has been a right fielder by trade, as we know from his days in Miami, but now once the trade came down back in 2017 or late 2017 into 18, the outfield certainly has been a position where he hasn't played. And no, Cody Bellinger has played right field, so Stanton still hasn't been able to put on a glove. And man, the right side of the outfield there at Yankee Stadium. Who knows if we'll get some burn there over the course of the early part of the week. That we'll have to wait and see. But for Judge to only have to sit out probably another 2 weeks, because if he's not going to throw a ball for, let's say, another week or so, it'll probably be until that weekend or maybe a couple days after where he'll be in the batter's box and certainly have a shot to at least play in games or participate in games, because as of right now, you will not see him for at least another week. And that is tough sledding for a Bomber team that lost 2 out of 3 to the Phillies. They got ambushed in the first 2 games, and they actually beat Zach Wheeler yesterday, which I thought was going to be a sweep. But Carlos Rodon, although he gave up a couple of home runs there to Otto Kemp, certainly did not implode and kept the Yankees, or really the Philly offense, at bay. So they're able to salvage that game as they head into the week. So that was some good news. Let's see if that's going to translate into the early part of the week, because the Yankees right now, they'll have the Rays coming in for 4 games, as they'll have a series or a week against the Florida teams. They'll have Tampa coming in for 4, including an afternoon game on Thursday, and then they'll go to Miami for the weekend as they'll play the Marlins. And the Marlins, as I talked about even last week, they took 2 out of 3 of the Brewers over the weekend and actually could have swept and put themselves in an even better position. They were actually 5 games behind the final spot in the wild card as of yesterday, which was mind-blowing to think. But anyway, so that's what the Yankees have forthcoming here over the next 7 days. And then the other story were the Tigers. And I talked about the Tigers a little bit last week, where they lost 9 out of 10, and they have not been playing well. And the Blue Jays come to town, and they had to salvage the game yesterday to avoid a sweep there at home at Comerica. And remember, they got swept by the Pirates prior to the Blue Jays coming to town. So for whatever the reason, you talk about ebbs, flows, peaks, valleys in a marathon season. Well, the Tigers are feeling it right now. And who knows what's going to happen with them. They're going to be fine in the division, similar to the Astros, and they have an even bigger lead than the Astros in the AL Central. But the Tigers, certainly, you wonder what they're going to do here over the next 3 days. I don't think they need much, but I would think for their own psyche, whether that means to bring in that veteran bat. And I understand they have veteran bats on the lineup, the Javi Baez's of the world, and they have guys that could certainly swing a big stick. But I wonder if they need a guy that's going to calm them down. And Baez won a championship, as you know, with the Cubs in 2016, but nobody looks to him as a rah-rah type guy, despite the fact that he's having a comeback season. But whether they get that veteran type bat or a 4th or 5th starter, because they could certainly use more pitching, or another arm out of that bullpen, the Tigers can't sit still. Despite Tarek Skubals having another big year, and it looks like he's going to win another Cy Young, and he actually lost there the other night in a matchup with Kevin Gossman. I mean, of course, he's going to lose sometime. He's not going to run the table the rest of the year. But the Tigers, I think, if you're the front office, you're going to have to do something. You don't have to do a lot. You don't have to shake up the team by any means, but definitely bring in a bat or an arm to at least go into August and September knowing that you have some reinforcements to take you down the stretch, maybe even extend that lead in the AL. And now what's brewing in the American League is a scenario where you have Toronto, Detroit, and Houston. Looks like they're all going to battle it out for the top 2 seeds in the American League. And with that being said, the Blue Jays currently, if I do my math correctly, have a 2-game lead over the Tigers and 2.5, actually 3 over the Astros. So not a comfortable lead by any means, but you'd have to take into account that you'd want to be a team that have the bye. And I understand historically it could be Jekyll and Hyde. As we all know, 2 years ago, the Dodgers, the Braves, even the Orioles had the bye, and they were out in the first round. Between the 3 teams, the Braves were the only one that actually won a game, and they only won 1 in the process, where the Orioles and Dodgers both got swept out of the postseason by the Rangers and by the Diamondbacks, respectively, who obviously met in the World Series that year. And then last year, the only team that left or exited stage right out of the postseason in the first round, because the Yankees advanced, the Dodgers advanced, and who were the other team that advanced? Well, the Tigers were a wild card because the Guardians advanced. So it was in the National League, and the National League team, well, the Phillies, as the Mets beat them. So 3 of the 4 teams that had the bye advanced last year, but the year before that, 3 of the 4 teams that had the bye were ousted. So who knows how that's going to shape down this year or shake down. But I would think you'd want to be at least the top 2 seeds in the American League to have that bye, to get your pitching rested, to get those extra days off, and then go at it in the division series. So that's what you have in the American League. And as far as the wild card goes there, while I'm at it, Yankees have a 1-game lead over the Red Sox, 2 in the loss, and a 1.5 games, 2 in the loss over the Mariners for the American League wild card. And then after that, you have the Rangers tied with the Mariners. We just talked about them tied in the AL West. They are tied, but Seattle has that 6th seed. Then you have the Rays who are 3 games back. And remember, big series against the Yankees this week. And who knows? I wouldn't expect it, despite the fact that Toronto did a number on the Yankees when they swept them 4 games up in Toronto. Let's see if the Rays have any magic like that as they come to the Bronx. If they were to sweep them, they will end up being a half game behind them in the wild card standings. But with Tampa 3 back, the Guardians 3.5 back, Royals 4, Angels 5. I'm not even going to talk about the Twins because they are 5.5 back. I'll keep it at 5. Now the Angels are 4 under as far as their record goes. So that may be a bit of a stretch, but 5 back, a 5-game winning streak puts them right back in the mix. So I guess I have to include them. But as it is right now, the Rangers are hot. So keep an eye out for them. But that is your American League scenario. And as far as the National League goes, I know the Mets have won 7 in a row after sweeping the Giants. Bit of a surprise there, but I know the Giants have been floundering out of the break. They got swept in Toronto. They did win 2 out of 3 in Atlanta, but now get swept by the Mets. Games were close, but the Mets were able to prevail. And I'll talk about the trades that happened too. I know the Yankees made a couple of deals. The Mets bringing in Gregory Soto, had to pitch the perfect inning there. I believe it was yesterday, because yesterday was his first appearance. So kudos to him. But the Mets 7 in a row. Now they go down to San Diego from NorCal to SoCal. Let's see if they can continue their winning ways. Now they have a 1.5 game lead in the NL East. And listen, the Mets recipe is to play low scoring. Yes, they have a big enough offense that they could win a 7-5 game, but they would prefer to win low-scoring games just to kind of make sure that the starting pitching, to hand it over to the bullpen, keeps it at a low-run total. So let's see how they do there, but they played well. Juan Soto continuing to swing a hot bat from the month of June into July. And the Mets, let's see what they can do here as we get to these final couple of months of the season. And think about it, people. Today, it being July 28th, we have precisely 2 months until the end of the Major League Baseball season. Because it does end September 28th, which is just mind-boggling to think. I feel like someone just started 5 minutes ago, and here we are talking 2 months from now where the baseball season will conclude. But as far as that goes, you know about the Phillies there, winning 2 out of 3. But lose a game in the standings because of the Mets sweeping. Now, the Brewers, who lost 2 out of 3, as I mentioned, to the Marlins, and right now have the top spot in the wild card standings. But overall, the Cubs, who are also tied, but I guess they have the tiebreaker. Now, the Cubs go to Milwaukee for 3 games this week, I believe starting today. Let me take a look at that. That is the big series by far here in the early part of the week. And in the middle of next month, Milwaukee will go to Chicago to play, count them, 5 games. They have a makeup day-night doubleheader, which was originally a 4-game series, but because they have that makeup, it's going to be a 5-game series. Now, it's the middle of August. It's not the middle of September, which would be telling to see how this divisional race will shape up. But when we get to that bridge and cross it, we'll certainly unpack it more. But for Cubs, Brewers, yes, that is tonight. Tonight, tomorrow, and I believe an afternoon game on Wednesday. So we'll see where that series and where they'll stand in the division come Thursday's podcast. So you don't want to miss that. So that is a huge series, as you know. But for the remainder of the National League, yeah, everything is pretty much status quo. I know the Giants hit an abutment there. Padres did a really good job after bouncing back, losing the first 2 games of the Cardinals. And as I mentioned, if the Cardinals would have ran the table, they would have overtaken the Padres, but no harm, no foul. They split that series as the Padres got the back 2, so they didn't gain any ground, although they got off and out of the gate pretty well, winning the first 2 games, but stubbed their toe without getting another game, which would have gained 2 games in the standings on the wild card against the Padres. but that went kaput. And that is pretty much it for the National League. And as far as the wild card goes there, as I pull up the standings, Brewers 2-game lead over the Phillies as of right now. Then the Padres, who are 4 back in the loss. So real significant situation there. 4 in the loss, but 3.5 back. Make sure I'm seeing that correctly. Yes. Then you had the Reds 1 game behind the Padres. The Giants, even with their free fall, 3 games back. The Cardinals, 3.5 back. I'm not even going to include the Diamondbacks. They're 4 under right now, although 6 back. And the Marlins are 6 back as well, so I'm not going to include those 2 teams. But that's what you have there in the National League wild card as far as that goes. And then with the trade deadline, and then I'll get to the schedule. You had a few trades there over the weekend. Anything eyebrow-raising or anything that was, ooh, wow, not really. I know the Yankees acquired Ryan McMahon and Ahmed Rosario on 2 separate deals. Rosario with the Nationals, McMahon with the Rockies. And although I like the McMahon deal, maybe a little bit more than Eugenio Suarez, because Suarez does not provide the defense that McMahon does, and he had a very stellar play there on Saturday where he made a diving stop to throw out a runner at first. And he did have a couple of hits, including a big double there yesterday, which I believe drove in 2. Let me double check that. I didn't watch the game in the highlights. I know that they won 4-3, of course. But McMahon trying to chip in offensively. He strikes out a ton, though, which you're not going to like in October, because he's a guy that, when the lineup is healthy, could add a little bit of length, but it could also be a sore spot. So that's something to keep in mind, where Suarez will give you a lot of thump, although I know he strikes out a ton too, just like all these guys. But still, when you're looking at a playoff scenario, you want a guy that's going to produce. You just don't want a guy that's going to go 1 for 15 in a division series and is going to end up being an automatic out. That you don't want. And then Rosario, I guess, just for versatility, he has played some outfield. Not that I expect him to be in the outfield, but maybe you play him at short. Maybe you play him even at second for that matter. Who knows? But there's a scenario where maybe for Anthony Volpe, does he have to look over his shoulder from time to time? I don't think that's the case, but you do have some insurance there with Rosario, who obviously is a veteran and has been around the block and knows New York. So that's what the Yankees did there. I talked about Gregory Soto with the Mets bringing him in. Now the Mets need a little bit more. They need another bullpen arm, and I think a center fielder. Who knows what's going to happen here over these next few days? There has not been any rumors. Nothing's been percolating. I've been on it, fingers on the pulse there. So I don't know what is the latest with the Mets, even the Yankees for that matter. I don't know if they're going to try to get another bullpen arm. You would think Luke Weaver has certainly have not been the Luke Weaver that we saw at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. Guys giving up home runs left and right, as you saw here, even in this series against the Phillies. So that bloom is certainly off the rose. But I wanted to bring up Soto. Yeah, Soto yesterday was very effective. Had 1 inning, a strikeout, 15 pitches. So that's what you have there with the newest member of the Met bullpen. But for the other trades, I talked about Randall Grichuk, as I mentioned. He getting traded from the Diamondbacks to the Royals as they try to keep themselves afloat in the American League wild card. And then you also have, and this was a weird one, where the Braves picked up Eric Fedde from the Cardinals. Now the Cardinals, I know they're trying to hang in, and Fedde, I guess, is a piece that is a rental. They're not looking to re-sign him. But the Cardinals, unless they're going to try to bring somebody else on board to fortify their rotation. But the Braves are out of the mix. They're, 11 games in the wild card. They're 1,000,000 games back in the division. I understand that their rotation is in shambles. No Spencer Schwellenbach, who has a fractured elbow. No Chris Sale with those fractured ribs that he has. You have Spencer Schwellenbach. As I mentioned Schwellenbach, I mentioned Sale. The other guys that I forgot. Oh, Grant Holmes was recently now is going to be on the IL. AJ Smith-Shawver, he's out too. I believe he's going to have Tommy John. So, yes, maybe they brought in Fedde just for a guy that can eat up innings, a guy that they can just plug in their rotation. Not that the Braves are going to do anything this year as far as get to October, but a little bit of a strange deal there in a deal with the Cardinals. But that's been it. And, yes, as far as anything else percolating, I haven't heard anything. Now, I could pull up some of the guys on the New York beat or the baseball beat to see what's happening, but really there's been no activity pretty much on Saturday, because yesterday didn't have anything. Let me pull up here right now. Let me see. Anything baseball. Trades. No, I mean, Seth Lugo, 2 years, $46 million, so he's not going anywhere. No, that is it. Luis Robert could be a guy that could be on the block, but nothing there. I know he got hit by a 101-mile-an-hour fastball, and he just came back up from the IL. That's it. Do I get into Ichiro's comments on the up in Cooperstown with the Hall of Fame with CeCe and Billy Wagner? And CeCe had a journey up to Cooperstown. His truck his van got stalled on the side of the road. People were willing to pick him up and take him to Cooperstown. I mean, yeah, just a bit of a mess there for the now newly minted Hall of Famer. But that's what you have in baseball. And as far as the schedule here for the week, and we talked about a couple of the big ones. Toronto's in Baltimore. I don't know if that's a 4-game series. Maybe I should pull that up. Just to see. Toronto in Baltimore for 4. Yes, no, maybe so. And in fact, they are going to be in Baltimore starting today for 4, but they're going to play a day-night doubleheader tomorrow. So 3 days, 4 games in 3 days between those division rivals. So that's what you have there. Of course, you know about Cubs, Brewers. That's the big series of the week. Arizona, Detroit. Colorado at Cleveland. You know about Rays, Yankees. LA at Cincinnati to play the Reds. That's a good series. Atlanta, KC, Boston, Minnesota, Philly at Chicago to play the White Sox. No good. Miami at St. Louis. I guess if Miami sweeps them, they'll get ahead of the Cardinals in the wild card race. Because remember, Marlins are 6 back, and the Cardinals are 3.5 back. So if you do the math, 2.5 back, they sweep them, they get ahead of them by a half game. So I guess maybe you want to keep in mind Texas at the Angels, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Seattle at the Athletics. Not a lot of good series there. All right, you want to say Mets, Padres. Obviously, Cubs, Brewers. Tampa, New York. Not even Arizona, Detroit. Both of those teams are struggling. That's it. That's all you got. So we will certainly come back on Thursday to rehash what has transpired here over the course of the early part of this baseball week. But besides that, that's all I got, people, when it comes to the baseball. Now, let me take off the cleats, put on the helmet and shoulder pads, and go through the NFL. And this is going to be brief, people. I'm not going to get into these injuries. I know you've had some injuries here in camp. Nothing of the big magnitude variety, and that's not to discount the first-round picks or former first-round picks or fourth-round picks that have got injured in camp, linebackers and things of that nature. Please, unless it's a quarterback, a left tackle, big-time receiver, pass rusher, corner, linebacker, somebody of that ilk, then we can talk. All right? If Myles Garrett's out for the year, that's news. And again, that's not to diminish any of the other players that are fighting for jobs or trying to get themselves a starting spot on whatever team that they're on. No, not trying to throw any shade at you guys, but I'm not going to go through every little detail of injuries throughout the early part of training camp. If it's a big-time player, obviously that's going to move the needle. A guy that was a fourth-round pick this year who's maybe expected to do big things, if he has a torn ACL, all right, but am I going to waste my breath talking about it? No. So nothing much to really unpack there. I know the one thing I'm going to unpack, and this is, I know, old news, but a new story. And I tell you, nobody's going to get in the face of Jerry Jones, whether it's his own kids or family members or officials that are on the team. They're not going to do that because we know it's Jerry's world and everybody else is paying rent. But he needs to stop with the press conferences. And we know that's not going to happen anytime soon. But after what I read yesterday, and after what I'm sure you've seen, read, heard, etc., somebody has to step in. Somebody has to just say, Dad, or Mr. Jones, or Jerry, enough. He came out after a microphone being put in front of his face, and as we all know, any microphone or camera that's in front of his face is one that he's not going to shy away or turn away from. But whether he was asked a question or not, but all the rumblings about the contract, and I talked about this on Thursday's podcast with the star pass rusher Micah Parsons, and how he came out and said, well, the chants were louder last year for CeeDee Lamb, as far as me wanting to pay CeeDee Lamb. This year, yeah, I've heard a little bit here and there, but nothing like last year. Jerry, again, stop. Don't do it. Stay away. And I'm sorry. If that was my dad, and this is to Stephen Jones and anybody else in the Jones family, if that was my dad, and I don't care how big he is, I don't care if he built the Cowboys from scratch, and as we all know, that's not the case. Bought the team, Tex Schramm, etc., said bye-bye to Tom Landry, the Tom Landry. So it's not as if this was his team from day one, but he owns the team. So yes, I get that. But can we have him sit down this morning with maybe not a steady shot of espresso or double espresso? Maybe can we just give him a green tea? And instead of giving him a muffin that is filled with sugar, maybe a little oatmeal with some berries? And could somebody sit down with Jerry Jones to say, Dad, no more interviews, just stay away. I understand that Micah Parsons, yes, he's looking for more money, he's looking for a contract, we're going to pay him, etc. We all know that internally, nobody externally needs to know that. But do you really have to say that the chants were louder for CeeDee last year than they are for Micah this year? Really? Could somebody do that there in the Jones family? I mean, come on. I get it, he's a dad, but if that was my dad, and I understand my dad's not Jerry Jones, but if that was my father, and I decided to say, Dad, can we just take a pause here? Can we just, you know the old saying, let in the good shit, exhale the bullshit? Sorry for me being a little profane here, but I'm just keeping it real. I mean, it's got to stop. It's got to stop. That's all I'll say about that, and let's move it along. And then you have the Hall of Fame game on Thursday, which I guess maybe we could talk on Thursday's podcast, because I wouldn't watch the Hall of Fame game. It's in my backyard, as you know, or if I just pull the blinds. And I don't even have a backyard, so that just goes to show. All right, let's go to some basketball news and notes as I lace up the high tops. And I'll separate this. NBA, nothing going on, but you had Billy Donovan, let me enunciate correctly. The Chicago Bull coach gets an extension. No terms were disclosed, so I don't know how much or for how long, but he's going to stay in the Windy City for at least the foreseeable future. So he gets an extension there. Congrats to Billy the Kid. And then on the college ranks, you had Bill Self, the two-time champ, as we all know. Two-time, let me make sure I got that right. Yeah, 08 and then obviously of 2022, because he did win that title in 08. Not Roy Williams. He was long gone. He did win a title there in 05 with the Tar Heels. Hospitalized, out of the hospital now, so good to hear that he's going to be at least on the mend, as they had to put 2 stents into his heart as he had some issues, and now that he's out of the hospital, he's feeling great. 62 years of age. Now, I don't know, stress with recruits, stress with life, stress with just the transfer portal, trying to recruit players, who knows, but hopefully he can take it easy, get a little bit more exercise, maybe lay off the, I don't know, blueberry pie, who knows, I don't know what he's eating, I'm just being silly here, people, and I'm not trying to make light or make fun of it. Actually, I want him to get better. 62, that's young, that's 6 years older than me. So hopefully, whatever the doctor's prescribed, and hopefully it's not something that he's got to prescribe for much longer, all he has to do is just get out there, get a little bit more active, some sunlight, some healthy food, like I mentioned. Maybe have some oatmeal in the morning as opposed to some bacon and eggs. So that's all I got to say about that. So Bill Self on the mend there. All the best and a speedy recovery to you. And to the WNBA, that's right, WNBA. I'm going to talk about this briefly. And as I mentioned on my commentary, I said this at the top, please check that out, because the WNBA, as I said last year, when they beat the Minnesota Lynx and with everything that transpired, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, popularity through the roof, I said, you know what, I'm going to have to at least slowly but surely dip my toe into the WNBA pool to just get a little bit more familiar and acclimated with it. Nobody says I'm going to start running stats and all that, but because you had a big injury there on Saturday night with Breanna Stewart, who left just 3 minutes into the game with a lower leg injury. And no, I did not watch. It's something that I saw, etc. Now, the extent of the injury unknown. Who knows if she's going to play this week. They're playing at Dallas and at Minnesota, which is a rematch. And this is the reason why I bring it up. Rematch of the final last year. And they still have 3 games, including the game this Wednesday against the Minnesota Lynx. And the Lynx have the best record in the sport, where they're going to meet them 3 times over the next 3 weeks, including a home and home, where they'll go back to Minnesota and then play in Brooklyn there at the Barclays Center in the middle of next month. So the Liberty, defending champs, the reigning champs, Breanna Stewart, who knows how long she's going to be out. Obviously a key player. We'll have to wait and see what's going to happen there as we're well into the second half of the WNBA season, which I believe concludes the middle of September. I looked that up, and I'm going to have to pull that up again. WNBA. Let me look at the schedule real quick, just to at least to be apprised and on top of it. Yeah, and it says here, reports she avoids a major leg injury, so maybe she will be back. Imaging done, nothing major turned up. Will travel with the team on its 4-game trip. Begins in Dallas tonight. And she's listed out for the game, but then, of course, they do play Wednesday, like I mentioned, against the Minnesota Lynx. So who knows if she's going to play then. But thankfully, nothing major as far as the leg of Stewart and her being out for any extended period of time. But for the Liberty, who right now the second best record in the sport, and I'm just going based on their final game of the season, because I just pulled it up real quick. Their season will end at Chicago September 11th. So yeah, you do have the playoffs there, middle of the month, toward the end of the month. And I guess the champion is crowned in early October, because what do they have? 2 rounds. They probably have a semifinal and a final round, which is 5 games. I remember years past it was a 3-game series. So I'll try to be on top of it as best I can. I said I was going to get more involved and to follow, and that's not to say I'm going to know about it quick, fast, in a hurry. And that's why I need to watch that commentary video, because I also compare it to a couple other sports, one that's been around forever and one that's really become popular over the last couple of decades, where I haven't really embraced it. I haven't really followed it, and it'll give you a little bit more in depth as far as my psyche when it comes to the W, as far as not being able to hop on board to really get a better feel for it day in and day out. Just throwing that out there for you guys and gals to check out if you can, and also subscribe in the process. So that's what I got with the basketball. As far as the hockey, lacing up my skates, nothing really to piggyback or go on from what's transpired. I know the Carolina Hurricanes, who have been wheeling and dealing in the offseason, re-signing their own players, even Nikolai Ehlers, the big one from Winnipeg. But Jackson Blake, the son of former Islander Jason Blake, signed a $45 million deal, 8 years. So do the math and what that stands for. A little bit over $5 million a year. Had 34 points in his rookie year, 21 years old. So they figured out, let's sign him long-term now. And they did do so. And Carolina trying to keep up with the Joneses, with the Panthers, especially them, in the Eastern Conference, as they try to really make a move to see if they could upset the 2-time defending champs at some point, maybe next spring. So they have Blake in the fold, along with many other players that they've signed here in this offseason, whether re-signed or signed this offseason. And let's see what else I have. Yeah, I know I didn't touch on Terry McLaurin. He's in camp, but he's on the PUP list with an ankle injury. That was with the NFL. And also the Chargers signing Rashawn Slater, highest paid left tackle in the league history, 4 years, $114 million based on an annual average salary. So my apologies for jumping all over the place, but to me, it was about Jerry's comments and nothing else. And then lastly, as I get to the top rope and jump from there, and I'm sure you've heard the news by now, and if not, you've been under a rock for the last 3 days. But Hulk Hogan, the legendary wrestler, dying at the age of 71. And I'm going to take this twofold. Now, we know how much he meant, or he means and has meant, to wrestling. No surprise there. And based on a lot of the things that I've heard late last week about how his appearance in Rocky III was pretty much the springboard of him being that iconic figure in wrestling. And as we all know, the early days of WrestleMania, him with Roddy Piper and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff and Cowboy Bob Orton and all of the makings of that rival. And I love Piper. I was a Piper guy back then. Hulk Hogan, him with the gold tights or the Speedos and ripping the shirt off and hey brother and all that. Yeah, we get it. But of course, he took the WWF at the time to greater heights, to even the guys that preceded him, whether it was Bob Backlund, whether it was Bruno Sammartino, whether it was guys like that who certainly were the building blocks and were to become the pillars of what has become now the WWE. But for those early days and even the mid-'80s when it really took off at WrestleMania, especially that first one with Mr. T and with Cyndi Lauper, and you had Lou Albano, who was in his corner. I mean, it was just a circus, and it was a soap opera. And that's where wrestling became part of the sports landscape, as far as not only just wasn't really a sport, but it became something to watch. And it grew exponentially based on the shoulders of Hulk Hogan. And Andre the Giant was the one who also preceded him, but obviously the epic match where Hogan slammed Andre the Giant, as you know, which is obviously a big-time moment in the history of wrestling. And then later on, becoming the part of the New World Order and WCW, and then becoming a heel and all that, and a lot of the stuff that happened, which I jumped off at that point, because when you got to the late 80s with me, with wrestling, I fell off. Those early days prior to Hogan, I was watching not as much or regularly. You had the wrestling there on Saturday nights on Channel 9 locally here in New York, which I watched. But it wasn't a situation where I was glued to watching every match or following it, or even with WrestleMania, which was around the time of my birthday every year, dating back to 1985. And once I got to maybe the early 90s, I started to slowly wean off of wrestling, and then I just fell off completely. Didn't get into it, wasn't into the Ultimate Warrior, wasn't into, Randy Macho Man Savage was even before that. But yeah, I just completely fell off. But Hogan, as we know, is not only a pillar, he is, in essence, pillars to what wrestling was then and what it's become overall. And I understand you have the stuff that happened in 2007 with the racial angle and how he was vilified for that, and rightfully so. And it took him, 8 years to apologize, and all these conflicting stories where he did apologize right away, and there was others where he didn't. And Hall of Fame inductions with the Harlem Heat, the tag team crew, and all these other stories, which I'm not going to get into because I'm not really privy to or known. This is just stuff that I've heard late last week where a lot of people remembered Hulk Hogan. And of course, the Hogan I remember was the Hogan I remember as a boy. The stuff that came on later on with the racial stuff, obviously not good. And certainly one thing I do not condone. But when I remembered him, as I left up on a short on the YouTube channel, I was just talking about his career. And my shorts are usually 1 minute. So I'm not going to babble about, what he did for wrestling and then, what he did outside of the ring. Yeah, that's a part of his story, unfortunately. And yeah, it does have to be brought up, and that's why I'm bringing it up now on this platform. And Hogan, no matter how you look at him today, right, you can look at him as, a guy that was my hero growing up and was someone I looked up to, and he had the song, to whatever that American song was, which I know that was more like late 80s, early 90s, and him with Iron Sheik, how could I forget that? But yeah, you had the good with the bad. And unfortunately, not to say that that's going to outweigh the good, but that also becomes a part of his legacy. So no matter how you look at him today, whether you look at him as like, he was my hero, but damn him for saying that, or you look at him, he's my hero, and yeah, he had a hiccup. No matter how you slice it, no matter how you look at it, you got to take both sides. And that's it. And I could go back on even some of the players that I loved growing up. And maybe not from a racial standpoint, but how their careers were curtailed, whether it was by drugs or by incidents off the field or whatever. And even, I hate to bring this up, but even look at someone like Kobe Bryant. Yes, he's revered. Yes, he's immortalized in some people's eyes. But Vail, Colorado, is part of his story. So no matter how you look at it, there's always going to be something. And that's not to, hey, rest in peace, Kobe. I get it. And we've been down that road before with him. Even the day after he died, I opened up my podcast with him. You can go check in the archives for that. And I maybe even made a little mention about what happened there in Vail. But that wasn't a day to really unpack it, considering he was just tragically killed in a helicopter accident. But this is the podcast where you're going to get fair across the board. This isn't pom-poms. This isn't, you're going to get realism. So with Hogan, you get those both sides. But with that being said, we know how much he meant to is wrestling a sport? No, I'll just say how much he meant to wrestling, how much he meant to millions of people around the globe, and however you look at him. And I just gave you my detail. It goes both sides. However you look at him is how you look at him. But you got to be fair. But with that being said, thoughts, prayers, condolences to his family, because they have to mourn, they have to grieve, and they have to deal with him and obviously his transition. So that you wouldn't want to wish on anybody. But for those who remember Hogan fondly, or maybe not remember him that as fondly, JAYREELZ, let him, whatever. All right, fine. I get that. There are both sides. But obviously, we know what he meant to wrestling, and it had to be brought up here today, even if it is 3 days after or 4 days almost after his passing, and first time here on the podcast talking about it, I had to bring it up, and therefore, there you go. That'll do it. I know maybe not the best way to land this proverbial plane, but it had to be done somehow, right? Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. And if you haven't done so, as I mentioned a million times throughout this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review the little engine that could. Trying to make a household name, trying to blaze a trail and path in this podcast universe to be that household name. And Lord knows, I am not stopping as long as I'm alive and breathing. So subscribe, rate, review on Apple, Spotify. The website is jayreels.com. The YouTube channel is, at JAYREELZ. Please do so. Send it to your family, friends, foes, frenemies, to the good, the great, the casual, the diehard, the kook sports fan in your life. Take a screenshot of it. Send it to me on any of my socials, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast, or just JAYREELZ on Instagram. JAYREELZ1, the number, on Twitter. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you can do so at the following: the JAYREELZ podcast at gmail.com, or the aforementioned social media accounts. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. In the blood, in the DNA, since birth. Where else are you going to get everything I discussed? I understand there's not a lot going on in sports, but everything I discussed in one podcast. Where? I'm listening. Still listening. And oh, by the way, I'm sure you're probably wondering, why did I cut my hair? I'll close it on this note. I cut it because I was tired of it. And granted, it wasn't as if it was teased to the moon or if it was hanging over my eyes or anything like that, but it was starting to get wavy, a little crazy. I know my wife usually cuts my hair, but I gave her a break. And because it's summer, because I hadn't had this short look since 2014, August of 2014, so it was almost full circle for another month. So I decided to say the hell with it. I just took the clippers and buzzed it right off. And you know what? I know it took a few hours, maybe a day or so to get used to, but hey, I feel good. I know Samson with the long hair, that was his strength. You know what? Maybe my strength is not having it, because I don't have to worry about having to brush it or having to wash it or anything. I still have to scrub it, of course. But yes, so I didn't lose a bet, or I'm trying to look cool or suave and this and that. No, I just went back to an old look that I hadn't rocked in almost a dozen years and felt that now is the time. Which, hey, that's what it was. So for those who are curious, for those who are wondering, that was the deal. But anyway, to close out, where else are you going to get all this, including an update on my hair, in one podcast? Nowhere else. And if so, please leave a comment. Hit me up. I'll be curious to know, because my competition is me. It's not anybody else. But when it comes to sports and talking about it, it is unparalleled that this podcast covers it all with nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury, with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.